but looks like we'll have a quorum. So thanks everybody for coming. We do have a change, pretty big change of the agenda. Amanda Spellacy is not going to be joining us today. She's actually kind of on a break with family. So she said, and when she saw the agenda, saw that Jared Jones was joining us, then she said, then the federal angle will be covered. So, so Allison, you get a little bit more time.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Lots to talk about, I'm sure. I'm sure you guys all are watching the news very closely. So there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah, we are. Absolutely. Kathy, do we have any public comment at all?
No, Martha, we do not.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Kathy. I guess we can dive in. Allison, like, go.
All right.
I'm sure we have questions, but we're happy to really just start with whatever update.
Yeah, I'll just give I'm sure you probably all saw yesterday. There's a lot of activity happening in DC. Well, hopefully something will come to fruition. There is conversations. Tom did a press conference with the Problem Solvers Caucus yesterday, as well as a number of senators from both the Democratic and Republican side. They've been talking through the weekend. I will tell you that I didn't know Tom was in DC because they weren't supposed to go back until today. He left at 3:00 yesterday morning because they figured out that they have reached a compromise kind of very late Monday evening, and they decided they wanted to get the information out there. There is no text to the bill yet. So the senators are largely working on the text of the legislation. There is obviously some drafts and things, but I'm sure you might have seen the top line numbers. I plan to forward that around. It does take care of a number of the programs that we're interested in, but it is much more short term. The top line figure is just over $900 billion. It would get us through.
Just a second. So we saw, and I shared an article from The Hill that mentioned senators, and it said it was by Camel, but the article didn't in the Problem Solvers Caucus or anybody.
Correct. Some of them mentioned it and some of them didn't. And you might have seen some press on Monday as well, because they had talked about a number of senators coming together and working behind the scenes on this. And it's the same group that have been talking through the weekend. And Tom's actually been talking with those senators. And I think part of the reason they might be focusing on that through the media is partially because the Senate has been the difficult side in all of these negotiations, as we know. And you're looking at Mitch McConnell's still got his own number out there as well. And I know I haven't looked fully at the comments that the president has made this morning in regards to what he would sign on to. I do know that yesterday, President-elect Biden had mentioned that he still hadn't reviewed the plan from the senators either. So it's kind of bits and pieces are out there, but yes, that was the press conference they were referring to, even though they only mentioned the senators and some of the coverage. Some of the coverage, they mentioned the Problem Solvers Caucus, some they did not. I think there were 8 Problem Solvers Caucus members that made the trip to DC to do the press conference. Again, they are not in session until today. So whoever showed up had to travel. They kind of figured out they had a deal like Monday night at like 10:00. So it wasn't the full group, and it wasn't the full group of senators, I think, that are in support as well. But the $900 billion would get us through about the first quarter of next year. It's not a long-term solution, but from the group's perspective, we know we need something now. And we're concerned about waiting until President-elect Biden is sworn in. And, whatever happens with the Senate, probabilities right now, there is the 50 Republicans. And, if they pick up the seats or not in Georgia, it's still going to be pretty gridlocked. I think we all know that. So we'd like to, in a bipartisan fashion, get something through now. I do know, also reported in the news, that Speaker Pelosi and Minority Leader Schumer apparently have proposed something to Mitch McConnell, which he does not seem to agree with. So we're still hopeful. The number that the bipartisan group put out yesterday is basically double what McConnell has and about half of what previously Schumer and Pelosi had. I don't know what their top dollar figure is right now on those plans. So I'm kind of waiting for information to come in as you are. Again, just waiting on the text and for the legislation to actually be introduced. Also, at the same time, they have to pass an omnibus bill of some type, either a CR or an omnibus. Tom thinks it's going to be an omnibus. potentially with maybe some relief wrapped in. Sometimes that's how we get these things through, which we would like to see if we can get some kind of relief across. It includes some state and local aid. It's not 100% of anything that anyone wants. It's bits and pieces of a little bit of everything. You know, you get $300 increase for unemployment. You get a little more PPP funding. You get a little more funding for testing and vaccine coordination. Little school funding, little postal funding in there. It's not, none of it is the 100% amount that was in anything before, but we're hopeful that by kind of hitting right in the middle and having some senators come to the table too. I think fairly well respected senators that showed up at that press conference yesterday and were willing to kind of put their names to something. They don't usually do that on the Senate side. They kind of let it fight out top typically. So we are still hopeful, but that's where it rests right now. Tom just had his media call. I don't know if they asked him anything else. I wasn't actually, it's probably just wrapping up right now. So we're just monitoring. He's there now. He's supposed to be there until Friday and then supposed to return next week. They have to pass an omnibus by the 11th. Hopefully. I don't think we really want a government shutdown right now on top of everything else. I don't think that would be our ideal situation. You know, obviously we want to get funding, relief funding, but I think if it just came to passing a CR, Tom would be supportive of that too, because now's not the time to play politics with any of this. You know, if we got to go through without having a relief deal, that's where we're at. That's not our goal. And not, you know, that's why we keep sticking our neck out there on this. It's time. It's far past time. We all know that.
Yeah.
And I know Schumer's working behind the scenes too. And I know Amanda can't join, but I mean, it sounds like a lot of the funding lines that he wants and that it's the amounts. I mean, we agree on the programs. And I think we just see it as try to come together somewhere in the middle. I mean, we've been trying to do that all along because McConnell doesn't seem to want to move. I think they might. I haven't seen the top line numbers out of Pelosi and Schumer, but I think they might be moving a little bit. But I think Mitch McConnell's got to move a little bit too.
Right. Before I go to committee members, quick question. What's the difference between an omnibus and a CR?
So a CR is just a continuation of funding as it is. Every funding line would remain the same. An omnibus bill means you tack something onto it. So we not jokingly yesterday, but we said it'd be a cromnibus because it would be Corona plus. Yeah. So we're hoping for the omnibus. It would be increased funding along any line or an additional program tacked onto it. A straight CR is not something. It's just funding the government at the levels they were funded at for FY20 would be a CR.
Okay, so literally, if there's any kind of additional COVID relief, then it becomes.
If they try to throw on anything, but that's not typical budget related, yes.
Okay, and I understood that one of the kind of negotiating points is the period of time, because if you say unemployment is $100 billion for 3 months, that's different than $100 billion for 12 months.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways that they're kind of.
It is, and part of that is when will the vaccine actually get out there and be distributed? How quickly will that happen? When will the economy start to recover based on that happening? And so I think some people are worried about, okay, you do a 12-month or even talking about state losses going into year 3 and 4. And do you fund all that now, or do you kind of wait and see how this plays out? And if you do a short term, you give it an opportunity to see how quickly the vaccine gets out there and how that impacts the rest of the economy, how quickly people are able to get back to work, school, our normal, semi-normal way of life. And so I think the people that are more on the short-term end of things are saying, okay, we don't have to spend as much money up front right now, which maybe means we can get something through. And that also gives us an opportunity to see how much money we need to spend moving forward. And maybe that'll kind of get some more people to say, okay, I can do this short term. It's a little less money. And it really gives us an opportunity to say, even for those that think the vaccine is going to get out there faster, get out there slower, at least at that point, when you get to the end of the 3 months, you'll have some more indicators of where we're at.
All right, Anna and then Mike.
Thanks, Allison. I know you're in a maelstrom right now, so I appreciate you taking the time. I know there at the federal levels, two questions. There was the moratorium on evictions, and given the surge that we're experiencing and the renewed shutdown, and in particular what we're seeing here and we're seeing everywhere, which is any sales that are happening are all online, and mom and pops are just dying. This being the most important season, so the package that McConnell has been forcing the hand on is a huge portion of it being support specifically of businesses, with no support for local and state governments. So I guess I'm curious where the line of no is for the Problem Solvers Caucus, and what you're seeing from senators, what you're hearing from Chuck. I personally, myself, like a no line is no to the businesses. We have, we've had an increase of how many centibillionaires? The wealth gap has quintupled in the last couple months alone. So that's my biggest concern, and I'm curious what you're hearing about that.
So the PPP program, and I'm assuming that's what you're referring to, the revisions that they plan to make, again, the text is not out there on the bill coming out of the bipartisan group, and actually there's no text on either side. But previously, what they have been discussing, and what most people seem to agree on, was that you had to be able to show a certain amount of loss within your business in order to qualify for another round. So I don't know if Tom would be originally at the end of, it was when we were about to go on August break, they were putting forward September, going into October, they were putting forward a PPP program extension, basically the money that was already there, because you weren't allowed to apply at that point, putting it back out there with the new provisions on there saying you had to have, a 40% loss in your business or something like that. Because you are right, some businesses are doing better during COVID, and they were qualified for PPP as well. And that's not the companies we're trying to help right now. I mean, you got, like you said, your mom and pops, and I can, our restaurants here on Market Street, I'm sitting in Corning right now. I just got an email from one I'm going to be calling here shortly, looking for another round of PPPs, down 50% this year. Those are the kind of places where, I would say we could put some, Tom would say we could put some more money towards those types of businesses. And we all know, we've all got our mom and pops. They own one location on one street. It's not a chain restaurant. It's not any of that type of stuff. And they are seeing significant losses. So if you put money forward for that, I don't think Tom's going to vote no if it's going to the places where the revenue was lost. Obviously, he's been putting his neck out there pretty heavily on the local and state funding, though. But he would have voted for that bill. He actually signed on. I believe there was a letter to get it to the floor, and he signed on to the PPP bill back in September. So I'm not going to tell you he wouldn't vote on a straight PPP bill if it was put in front of him, with the provisions to support businesses that have had significant loss. But that's not what we want to see. We want to see it all. And obviously the unemployment, it would be retroactive to when the federal assistance, December 1st, I believe was the date, because I think that's when the president's FEMA assistance ended. And we do know that people are definitely struggling. I mean, you've seen the reports of people putting more money on their credit cards and all of that right now, which is not something that anybody wants to see. But it would be it's a $300 what they're looking at, what they proposed instead of the $600. Again, the happy medium in some cities. That's not going to do it. Around here, it probably works. It's unfortunate that they can't figure out how to do a formula, based on where you live. Obviously, the cost of living is a little different down in New York City and Long Island than it is in our area. But yes,
Tompkins County.
No, and you guys have higher living. And in regards to the moratorium on rent, Tom is supportive of extending that. But he's also supportive of getting landlords assistance. I'm sure you guys are getting calls from landlords too that can't pay the property taxes because they're not getting any rent. And right now they haven't gotten any assistance through this. And we all know good landlords and bad landlords. I'm not going to sit here and defend every landlord, but at the same time, you got your property tax bills coming up, and how the heck are you going to pay those, especially if you have multiple properties and in a community like yours where they're probably renting to. I'm assuming you have some larger landlords over there in Tompkins, just with your college town. And I don't know how they're going to move forward if they don't get any assistance with paying just their taxes to you. And then that puts the whole cycle, you're not getting property taxes, is going to create an even bigger problem.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, it's going to be huge. Yeah.
Landlords. So.
Yeah. So we're trying to figure out a way, if we continue on the moratorium, we got to take care of the landlord side too. So he is supportive of all those. I don't know. My guess is if they do anything before the end of the year, it is going to be on this omnibus. So they'd all be included in one bill, Anna, instead of being separate bills. I don't think you're going to get any separate bill through on straight PPP, straight, any of that stuff. So, and then if they wait until January, it's probably going to be some huge monster bill. And I don't know how they get it through the Senate again. So we're trying everything we can. I'm just really glad to see senators sticking their necks out there too. They really haven't done that this much during this time. So
Thanks, Allison.
Thank
Mike,
you.
and I see
no,
Mike.
it's confusing. So it's all convoluted, but trying to do what we can.
That's good. Mike Sigler, and then glad to see you, Mike Lane. And Mike, if you're not able to raise your hand, are you on the phone or computer, Mike Lane?
I'm on the computer, but my camera's not working. Of course, I had another update come through on my computer, knocked everything out. But I'm here.
Okay, are you able to raise your hand on the little participant screen?
Yeah, if I can do that.
Okay, all right. Well, if we miss you, just yell. I got Mike and then Deborah. I see your hand up now. That's good. All right, go ahead, Mike Sigler.
Hi, Allison.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, actually, two questions I probably should have asked you before, but I didn't, so they'll be a surprise. The first one's easy. I'll just put them together. I'm assuming Tom is secure on Ways and Means. And the second question is, I had read an article that earmarks might be coming back. Didn't know how truthful that article was. If it is truthful, what does that mean? Because we haven't had them in so many years. So
It's a rumor on the earmarks end. Unfortunately, I gotta say this: earmarks. I understand why they went away, but man, there are moments in this office where it would be exceptionally helpful for us. There are places so deserving, especially in rural areas. It's much harder to qualify or to get the funding. You're competing against some cities that have a tremendous amount of assets to hire grant writers and things. Rumor right now. There was talk about this actually, I think right around the time Trump was elected, they had been talking about bringing earmarks back and it never went anywhere. So I would say that is absolutely something. I don't know if we would, if they can't be brought back as an earmark. It'd have to be called something else because first of all, the American public hates that term. People, they think about the bridge to nowhere, whatever else, and it's taboo. But right now, no, I haven't seen any real movement on bringing back earmarks. And I'm sorry, what was your first question?
Tom's position on Ways and Means, is that secure?
I mean, we haven't heard any talk of him changing. Usually once you get on there, it's really just figuring out if he's going to stay, the minority leader or the ranking member of the Social Security subcommittee, or go to a different subcommittee. Really, once you're on Ways and Means, they don't usually remove you unless you have some kind of problem from your committees. Like I said, I hate to say that, but once you get on a committee that's a little more desirable, you usually have to do something wrong to get moved. And we're fortunate that does not happen. So it'll really be subcommittees where we'll be looking at, what he's going to be on next time. And he's been on a number of them since he's been there. So, I mean, we have some knowledge depth in any of them at this point, but we're looking at staying on Social Security, obviously an important thing moving forward. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Deborah.
Yeah, thanks, Martha. And thank you, Allison. You and Tom have really just stepped up to the plate throughout the coronavirus thing. And even though I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, I do appreciate the amount of constituent service that you've provided.
Thank you.
And apropos of Mike's question, I actually read in the New York Times, of all places, an editorial that said, oh, maybe it would be good to have earmarks or bring pork back, because at least that gets people to the table with things they can bargain with. And God knows we need some bargaining and some compromise.
And the other thing that you have to remember with the earmarks is if Congress isn't deciding where the money goes, the executive branch is.
Yeah.
So there's still somebody, whether elected, you're either choosing whether the elected person gets to decide where the money goes or somebody that wasn't elected gets to decide where the money goes. So it's still the same amount of federal money. It's just moved from one branch to the other. And that's the issue that a lot of people forget, is they think that, oh, well, Congress just spends the money foolishly, but you might not agree with every grant that the executive agency is giving out either.
Right. And that's a beautiful segue into my question. Allison, I don't know if you or even maybe Susan Riley can address this, but about a month ago, I started reading all these really confusing articles about Steve Mnuchin putting a time limit on CARES funding that was available through Treasury for the executive to distribute. Can you clarify that, or do you know anything about it?
So I don't know anything about it. If Congress doesn't specifically say in a piece of legislation, it is often left up to the executive agency to determine. And so that might be the issue. I'm not familiar with it, though. If you want to send it my way, absolutely be happy to take a look at it. But that's when Congress chooses not to put something in legislation, or, just, and I don't want to say forgets, but, if they don't put something in legislation, it really does. That's why executive agencies get to make up regulations for things. If it's not in legislation, they're making up, and that's why, you got comment periods and all that from the public. It really does leave a lot up to the executive branch, depending on how much is in a piece of legislation.
Okay, thanks.
So if you want to send it my way, though, I haven't seen it. I'm just, that's just a generalization, but I'd be happy to check it out.
All right. Well, I think you've got enough to do other than resolving my confusion.
Yeah.
Deborah, was that about in the first, there was money allocated to state and local state and the large local governments in the first CARES Act.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was a time limit of December 31st, and they're
Oh,
having.
I do know what you're talking about.
Is that what you mean, Deborah?
It's actually December 30th. For some reason in the Congress, actually, and it's in the law, Congress put December 30th rather than December 31st. I have heard that one. So they actually don't have until the last day of the year. They have until the second to the last day of the year, which that was actually in the legislation. We have had a couple of groups reach out to us out of Erie County because they did receive that. They're over 500,000, so they did receive that local assistance. And yeah, that is, I don't know who wrote that in there, but I don't know if it was a mistake or on purpose, but it's in there. And Congress would actually have to pass legislation to change the date, which they're not going to do right now, from by one day.
Someone just hopes this year will be over sooner.
Yeah, apparently.
No, Martha, that isn't what I was asking about. Apparently,
Okay.
the money through CARES that was put somehow under Treasury's management so that the executive could distribute it as needed. And there was no deadline put on how long it would be available. This is how I understood what I read, but I'm not sure. And what
There's also
happened?
the Federal Reserve loan program.
Yeah, this is what I need. I was seeking clarification on, because I don't know what it was. All I read was that Mnuchin had more or less arbitrarily put a deadline on it to the end of this year. And of course, there was speculation that that was done to hamstring the incoming administration from using that money. So I don't know.
I think I heard something about the Federal Reserve loan program.
It's possible.
Okay. Thanks, Deborah. Mike Lane?
Good morning, Allison. Thank you for being with us. If this question has already been answered before I could get on, just say so. But reading the reports about the compromise bill that's been offered by Tom and his colleagues, it talked about, I think, 160 billion for states and cities. Does that include, is that like it was before, where only the states and cities got it, over 500,000, or does it include all municipalities?
Well, Mike, here's what I'll say. That's what our intent is, and that's what Tom has been negotiating. The bill is not in text yet. Our intent is to have it, every state, every local municipality, regardless of size. I would assume that is what will be put in the text as well. I don't count anything until it's written and signed, though. So yeah, the intent is for every level of government, and it's a much lower number, obviously, than we had been talking about before. We were the 500 billion level. You've seen up to $1 trillion, but it is, again, the first 3 months of next year. So it's not going forward. It's not factoring in the losses that we will potentially have moving into budgets for next year. It's a short-term provision. So yes, the intent is to
You're
cover
saying the
everyone.
compromise group wants it to be for all the municipalities.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And counties.
Counties, yeah. But keep in mind, it's a very short-term bill. I'm kind of waiting to see. I don't know if they've written out at this point whether, I would, and this is an assumption, you got to be able to go back into where the losses are from last year and really calculate that too and move forward. I don't know if they would put a deadline on, you have to show your margins up until our losses up until March 31st of 2021. So I'm waiting on the text, because those details obviously really matter. We don't have the text in hand yet. And so I can't guarantee if it would cover everything based on the dollar figure that they have out there. I don't know if it would or not. I am no mathematician by any stretch of the imagination, and so I haven't seen all the losses that they're assuming or calculating nationwide at this point. Some places have already gotten revenue, but again, it has to be used by the end of the year. I don't know if they would be able to get more. So that's kind of what I'm waiting to see as well.
Okay, and
So
then
sorry, that doesn't really answer your question directly.
well,
It's
it helps.
hard-
It helps. If it's not written, it's not written. I understand.
Yeah, actually, and when they were announcing it yesterday morning, and I think you jumped on, they had worked out the top line numbers as of like Monday night. Part of the reason they chose to announce this yesterday was they wanted to really continue the conversation. They've got a week and a half left in DC, basically this year. That's what they're supposed to be done. At the latest, December 11th, that's when they have to pass at least a CR, continuing resolution, to fund the government. And so they don't want people to just be not doing any, like working on this over the next 2 weeks. And the House went back into session today, so they actually did it before the House went back into session. And that's part of the reason that I don't have as much detail as I would like at this point, is because it was, I don't want to say premature. It was really, here's our top line numbers. Let's start this conversation. Let's get this going as well.
And I'll just put in a side two things. One, I was glad to see that there's going to be some money for airports.
Yeah.
That's really important in your compromise bill if it goes forward. The other thing is, people mentioned earmarks. I'm a fan of earmarks, and because of the reasons that you said, it helps the rural areas get some funding, usually really good funding, when they can't compete otherwise. And we know there are abuses out there, but the best way to solve those abuses is sunlight, and have it in the media what is actually being funded. It's the same at the state level with member items. They're very good member items that do a lot of good. It's easier to get than through some of the other kinds of methods that you have to apply for, and maybe can't compete. But I will just say a case in point. In Dryden, we have a flood control project that was paid for originally was going to be paid for by the Soil Conservation Service. We waited 18 years, went through all the processes, and the year that we were supposed to be funded, Congress eliminated funding for the whole program. And were it not for an earmark by Congressman Walsh and Congressman Hinchy, we would not have had it built. It was like $2.5 million, but there's an example.
And I will tell you, I've been with Tom for 10 years. It's incredibly frustrating when somebody reaches out and says, and with a very worthy cause that absolutely should be funded, and says, how can I go about getting the resources for this? And, does the congressman have any money? And you can direct them to about, 3 or 4 federal grants that maybe you'll qualify for, but you got to apply versus how many, hundreds or thousands of people across the country. And we'll try to help you out and push it forward for you. But, there's not a lot of options to provide them with. And that is very frustrating too, because there's some places that are incredibly in need that you can't really send very many solutions to.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, I think we could point to arguments on both sides as kind of an incumbent protection program, which is one of the reasons that the public maybe wasn't so enamored of the program. But
oh yeah, there's definitely reasons they weren't.
right, but they're obviously really good, good examples of projects that have been supported that way and at the state level as well as the federal level. I had a question about, and then I see, it looks like the phone number for Jared Jones, which, hi Jared, we see you there. I'm glad you're on the call. So Allison, when you say you don't know details about the state and local aid, do you have any idea? Let me see if there's anything, like, is it intended, you think, for lost revenue or just per capita? Do you have any idea?
Based on how they're doing a number of the programs, I think you're going to have to show some kind of lost revenue. And that's the direction we were headed previously, was really making up for lost revenue. Now that would obviously in New York State be across a variety of spectrums, and some, it's so tough sometimes because every state operates a little differently, and when you're making the federal policy and you're talking about counties versus towns, I mean, New York State has a lot of levels of government. Whether you think that's a good or bad, we just do compared to some other places. And so when we start getting into like the loss of revenue things, talking to other places might only have counties or, whatever level of government they have, and making sure that we're covering all of that and have that included in the legislation is going to be where the text is important. Because I know you're going to experience loss of revenue across a variety of different types of taxes and that type of thing where they might not have that in other areas. So we got to make sure that's all included when we talk about loss of revenue.
And how about tourism kind of taxes, room taxes that are also?
Then that's where the devil's in the details in regards to language. Okay. When we move it, it's going to, that kind of language. And if you leave it too vague, you leave room for sometimes interpretation is a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. And that's why, we have various texts that's been released before in regards to loss of revenue. And I'm sure we're going to try to pull from that because they did have, state and local language previously that included that. But I will say that largely the senators' offices are the ones that are drafting this. They just have bigger staff and more resources at this point. Once we get the text, we'll be taking a look at that.
Okay, that's great. And the idea of the tourism tax seemed to have the advantage of being able to pull in really every state, even, very rural states have national parks, for example, and have a tourism economy. So that pulled in some allies. So
yeah, no, absolutely. That is true. And I know there are a number of Republicans that don't think that we need any additional aid, but I think you probably saw enough Republicans at that press conference yesterday to be able to vote as needed to pass a piece of legislation if we can just find some middle ground. And that's what we need right now. This is not a party thing. And even for those folks that don't think we need any more stimulus or any more assistance during this, I can't imagine their states aren't hurting because every state is seeing a spike. So I don't know how much they have to feel it in order to think that more assistance is needed. But I'm sure they're hearing from their local governments too. So that's also, you just kind of wonder what they're hearing. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, well, I'm in the camp that something has to happen now.
And that's why, like I said, Tom, I was shocked to find out that he was in DC yesterday morning when I woke up because I thought he was going to be up on the Hill in Corning. And I called our scheduler and I said, "Where's Tom right now?" He said, "He's down here about to do a press conference," because it just happened so fast, and they just wanted to get out and get in front of it. But
Well, thank you.
that's the way it
Thank you.
works sometimes.
Thank you very much, and
Yeah.
the center, thanks to him.
I will.
And we certainly.
Well, and stay tuned. If I get another update, I actually had intended to send around the Problem Solvers Caucus stuff yesterday. I'll send around to the group and whatever update numbers once we get a little more text to it to you all.
We appreciate that, and please share with him that we deeply appreciate that, fighting for it, and trying to keep state and local aid in the mix, and I think they're making a difference. Let's hope it gets to the finish line.
All right, I'll let them know, and just contact me if you have any questions in the meantime.
All right, thank you, Allison, and stay on the line for a second and meet Jared Jones. I don't know if you've met him. He's the Deputy State Director for Senator Kirsten Jones.
Oh man, he took over for Sarah.
He took over for Sarah. Yes.
Big shoes to fill there.
That's right. Absolutely. And Jared, are you, can you hear me? Are you with
I think
us?
he's muted.
Yeah, he's muted. He should mute himself. You're on a phone. Kathy Cover, do you know whether he does like a *6 or something to unmute himself?
See if I can unmute him.
Okay. We're like deaf and blind here. We don't know.
There we go.
Hey, I think I'm unmuted now.
You
Yes,
are.
hi, Jared.
I was talking this whole time thinking you guys can hear me, but you couldn't.
Well, welcome. We're delighted to have you. And Allison Hunt from Tom Reed's office is still on the call.
Yes, hi Jared.
Hey, Allison, I'm not sure if you remember, we've worked together in the past. When I used to work for the senator's office a number of years ago.
Okay. I don't, I'm better, and I hate to say this as somebody that works for Tom, I'm much better with faces than names. If I ever call you by the wrong name, I'm sorry. But I obviously had I've worked for Tom for 10 years now. So I worked closely with Sarah over the years as well. And congratulations on the gig, and look forward to working with you.
Yeah, you as well.
All right. Thanks so much, Allison.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks a lot. And a good holiday, Allison. I guess we won't see you till after then. Hi, Jared. How are you? How's the job?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. So the floor is yours. We were just talking about what we talk about most of these meetings is the prospects of a COVID relief bill. And obviously there's a lot of news this week. So if you have any updates or sense of the positions, go for it.
So thank you. Pleasure to be here. Hopefully I can join these meetings more regularly going forward. I'm going to take this opportunity to really talk about some of Senator Gillibrand's perspective on some of the recent developments on Capitol Hill. Just to give like a general overview, so if folks have specific questions for me, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I'm going to give my email at the end of this call. But generally, there are 3 issues that I want to give you an update on. The COVID relief bill, the Senator's direct support for Community Act, and the omnibus bill, which is currently in progress for funding the government past December 11th. So at the moment, we don't have many details as of the state of a potential COVID relief package. There have been continued discussions about what a potential package might look like, but nothing material really has emerged for the Senator's consideration. As a general matter, we're hopeful that any bill will include funding for small business relief, increase access to SNAP benefits and food assistance, and funding for childcare. The Senator has spoken regularly about her commitment to addressing these issues in a COVID relief bill, and she's co-sponsored the Childcare as Essential Act to support childcare providers who are hit particularly hard. Senator Gillibrand's also firmly in support of extension to enhance unemployment benefits, and a potential relief bill especially as we enter the holiday seasons. And then finally, which I want to really highlight here, is funding for state and local government remains among her top priorities. She's adamant that state and local aid has to be included in a COVID relief bill to ensure that local governments can avoid cuts. We know there's been a lot of budget shortfalls this year because of the pandemic. Senator Gillibrand wants to see funding levels close to about $375 billion for local government, in particular, $500 billion for state government, which was included in the HEROES Act, which passed the House in May. So on that note, so Senator Gillibrand introduced, I'm not sure if Sarah spoke to you guys about this, but the Direct Support for Community Act. The bill would create a relief fund and a funding formula for emergency relief to local government, so both municipal and county, and a large chunk of funding would be allocated directly to municipal government, so allowing local governments to make decisions about local funding priorities and avoid cuts to essential services and local needs. The bills, so like I said before, the bill's text was included in the HEROES Act, which passed in May, but based on some preliminary estimates from the House, just to give you, I pulled some of the local numbers so folks would have a better sense of this. This would mean $38 million in aid to Tompkins County in the upcoming fiscal year. $32.5 million in aid to Ithaca, $4.5 million to Dryden, $3.8 million to Lansing. So essentially funding for local governments is it's one of her top priorities. And we're hopeful that the Direct Support for Community Act will provide some necessary aid to local government. That's on COVID. I just want to quickly give you an update on the omnibus bill, and then we can talk a little bit more. So before the year is out, Congress has to pass an omnibus package. It has to pass a spending package to fund the government to avoid a government shutdown. You all know this. Funding for the government runs out on December 11th, so it's literally 9 days away. We're hopeful we're going to pass the spending package and avert a shutdown before then. At the moment, we don't have many details about what the package will look like. The House and Senate Appropriations Committee are working hard to hammer out specific language of the bill, but for now, we're waiting to see what the committees put forward. And at this time, we're going to assess the situation, and hopefully we'll have a better idea prior to December 11th what this will look like. And that's really the latest status on the omnibus. I hope this was generally useful. I'm happy to, try and answer any general questions, but if folks have specific stuff, I can follow up with you individually offline. I'm going to save my email right now so everyone has it, but then Martha, if you don't mind, I can, if I'm looped in an email with everyone, I could just send over my email or we could share it somehow. But it's Jared, so my first name JARRED _Jones at gillibrand.senate.gov. So my first name Jared _Jones at gillibrand.senate.gov. Happy to answer any specific questions for folks if they want to email me directly after, but that's really my update right now.
All right, thank you so much, Jared. Really appreciate that. Questions from the committee? Hi, Sean. I'm glad you're able to join us. So, okay, Deborah and then Anna.
This is a very general and not a budget question, but Jared, could you remind us what committees the senator sits on?
Yeah, the senator is on Ag and Armed Services.
Okay.
That just the one committee?
I think it's two, isn't it?
Jared, did we lose you?
Looks like he dropped off.
I still see the number.
The 585 number?
Yeah. Now I don't.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Okay. So we will, usually folks run more than one committee, so
I'll watch for him to come back in.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. All right, well, tell you what, we can tap dance for a while. I'm sure he'll be back. Deborah especially can tap dance. Hi, Susan, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. And we are, I know we're expecting Charlie and Zoe coming on, but a little bit later than this, so.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, thanks again for the recognition in the Togo Awards. I was able to listen to the whole thing over the weekend and
Well, yeah,
really
I mean,
a lot.
so well deserved. And, you know, we've all had to work together through all of this. So I think this has been a great partnership. So we appreciate every single one of you are doing.
How's it going now? Are things quieting down a bit?
Yeah, so we've had most of the on-campus residents have moved off. We have about 250 remaining on campus. I think come the third week in December, we'll be down to about 50 on-campus students who will be there for the duration of over the true winter break. These are approximate numbers, of course. There are still a number of students who are living out in the community. It's hard for us to really nail down that number, but I think if you're in and out of town at all, you can definitely tell it's quieted a bit. And then we'll be doing what we did at the beginning of the fall semester in the spring and testing and getting students back on campus to start classes. I think it's February 7th or 8th. I don't have the number in front of me. So we're pleased with how things worked this past semester. And so we'll continue to try and move forward with best practices. And, you know, who knows what's going to be happening. And maybe there'll be some shortened quarantine times. Who knows? You know, these are things that we'll work with as they come up. But business as usual.
Right. And,
yeah.
You know, it really, Cornell has really become an international model. I saw the, hey, Charlie.
Hey, folks, this is Jared. I apologize. I'm on a different line here. My phone just died.
Okay. All right, great. All right, so we'll come back to that and come back, Charlie, to what you got. We're talking to Jared Jones, who's Deputy State Director for Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Hi, Jared. So go ahead. Deborah.
And you died right after Ag and Armed Services.
Okay.
You say armed
she's on ag. Yep, she's on ag. She's on armed services. She's on a special committee for aging, and she's also on EPW, Environment and Public Works.
I thought you said ag and farm services. That's why I thought.
No, ag, armed services, and EPW.
Okay. All right, great.
What's EPW? Environmental?
Environment and Public Works.
So she's on 3 committees.
Yeah, yep, she's on 3 committees. That's correct.
And what was that special committee?
A special committee on aging.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anna, you were next up.
Well, mine was more of a general question. You know, we've been reading constantly in the Senate in particular, how there's a large amount of the GOP that doesn't want to do a stimulus package at all. McConnell seems pretty dead set on a very small stimulus bill, highly focused on business relief. And I guess I'm curious if you've seen any movement at all, given the sort of expanding economic and COVID crises that we're currently in.
It's hard. I can't really speak to where McConnell's brain is on this. I do think that, and I heard part of what Allison said, know that like there has been a lot of Republican support behind a stimulus because it impacts the entire country. And I think we do believe that a stimulus will happen. It's a matter of when. I'm not really sure. I know that the senator's really been urging her colleagues to support some critical things like increased funding for state and local government, support for childcare, expanding unemployment. But I do believe that there's a lot of bipartisan support for a stimulus package. And I think McConnell will likely have to move. It's just a matter of when he does it. I'm not sure when he will.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Well, I've heard people talk about stimulus separately from relief. That there's the package that was unveiled yesterday, the 908 billion bipartisan package, that's really a relief bill, whereas stimulus really means more things like, job creation, support for, green energy projects, broadband infrastructure, things like that. Do you see two separate conversations or what?
I have not. I could check in with our ledge team to kind of see if people are trying to negotiate those things separately, but my sense was it was one, but I can get a better idea from our folks in DC to figure out if they're really trying to, hash them out separately. But my sense was they were going to be a collective.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, Jared. Any other questions or comments for Jared from the committee or anybody else?
No, just welcome, Jared.
Yeah, I wanted to say too, and if folks have questions afterwards, they think of something they want to ask me or something I'm not able to answer, I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards if you shoot me an email too.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I do want to ask one other thing. And I don't mean to reinforce stereotypes we're all stuck with, but why not the Biden administration having many more women nominees for top positions? Do you think there will be sort of big picture, more support for childcare kind of programs and supports?
I sure hope so. I do. I think, it's good. I think things are going to shift. I think there's going to be a big shift. We're going to continue fighting for all the things we've been fighting for all along. And I think that there may be, hopefully our concerns won't be met with deaf ears now, and we'll be able to have some real conversations about some of these big picture issues like childcare in this country, and paid leave and other things like that. So.
Okay, great. I think whatever Senator Gillibrand does in that category, we're in support of it. Deborah.
Yeah, one last question. Of course, we keep reading that it will be difficult for the incoming administration to get confirmation for some of its cabinet appointments. What's your that?
I had this conversation with another colleague yesterday, and he was making that case, and I don't think so, because I constantly have to remind myself, and Joe Biden was in the Senate for decades, and was in the Senate as a senator who was known for building relationships across the aisle. And so my sense is that he still has a lot of those relationships with senators. And I think he's going to be able to get a lot of things done because of those relationships. And he's someone who he builds real strong, lasting relationships with his colleagues. And I think I think we will see that will pay off in the long run for him in terms of getting people through. So I don't suspect that there will be a lot of holdup for that.
You don't think that has changed significantly in the last 12 years?
No, I think there's definitely been change, but I think, a lot of the folks that he's bringing in they're not new faces by any measure. A lot of folks who people know and respect. So, only time will tell, but that's my general assessment of it.
Okay, thank you. That's encouraging.
We can hope. The news has mentioned a number of times that Senator McConnell was the only Republican who went to Beau Biden's funeral. So maybe there is something there. Let's hope. Thank you so much, Jared. It's great to meet you, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.
All right. Have a good holiday. Take
You
care.
too. Take care.
Charlie, welcome. We'd already started talking with Susan about Cornell stuff because Jared had dropped a phone call. Great to have you, Charlie. Get back, Susan, you were talking about, yeah,
Second semester and folks coming back. I think
Yeah.
the only thing I would add to what I mentioned earlier is that there's going to be an increase of students who choose to live on campus for second semester, which I think given that there were many students who stayed away because of being kind of nervous, I think some of those fears have been addressed. So I think we will see an increase in the return of number of students to the area, which for businesses and local activity is good, assuming they continue to adhere to the rules. So,
you mean on campus as well as in the community?
yeah, well, yeah, definitely on campus, which we can track better than we can those who are choosing to come back off campus. But I imagine those numbers may be up.
And what I was saying about the Cornell's international model, I saw the Cornell Chronicle piece that showed the Canadian health system holding up Cornell. A long story about with interviews of Cornell students and shots of campus and Provost Kotlikoff and all. And it was really stellar press out of this, you guys. I know that's the only reason you did the right thing.
As we all know, it was a long journey, but it took all of us working together to get here. So we're pleased that it's
Right.
we did.
And you gotta keep knocking on the wood to make sure it persists. So
For sure.
Charlie, what's going on in Albany? Anything happening?
Nothing. Maybe I'll just talk a little more about campus, just like to really just continue about the topic that you've just been talking to Susan about. This semester was much, I will say, sort of safer than we thought it would be. We didn't know. All we could do was plan and model, and all the data we used, and we used a lot of data to look at what we needed to do. And it was all second or third hand. We were looking at data, what's the infection rate? What's the incubation period? What are the symptoms? What number of people display symptoms? What age groups? Now we have a lot more data of our own that we can rely on to model. Unfortunately, the number of cases, again, worldwide, US, locally is so much higher. So it's leading us to really be a lot more careful. We thought we were in a pickle at the beginning of last semester. It's so much worse now. And we don't know how much worse it'll be. We believe it will be worse than today. It'll be 2 months from now. It'll be a lot worse. We don't know. But we're looking at all of these things that we can do to try again to have in-person instruction. And we're looking at the frequency of tests. We were surprised by a number of things. Again, we knew we'd bring in infections from people from around the country and the rest of the state, but that's even so much dramatically worse now, looking ahead to that arrival testing. We knew that would be important, so we did arrival testing, but wow, that was really important to catch the infections early and to contact trace and isolate. So we did that. This next round, that's going to be even more critical to do it right. So just like Susan said, but we'll have a marginally increased number of on-campus students. So we'll have more testing to do for the arrival. And we know how serious that is. Our students, we weren't sure what the compliance rate would be when we did it. We of course have the contractual, the behavioral contract. Turned out that our students are like 98% compliant. Amazing. Okay. Sure, we did things and we did a lot of advertising, paid and unpaid, and messages, but that was really successful. A lot of our colleagues at other schools not successful in that compliance. Our students just were incredible, but There's also a function of, it's the fatigue. They've done this already. It's not novel. We also, the testing itself, the kind of testing we're looking at, the front of the nose, it's quick, it's easy. It's so much better. The saliva testing that other people are doing, we're looking at that, pluses and minuses. It actually takes longer to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking at also, I'll stop with this, but one big surprise, there are a lot of different things we're learning. One big shocker that we've had is in recent weeks, the number of positives from our staff. We didn't really envision that the staff would come in with infections. We always were focused very much on the students, younger people behaving, in these certain ways and traveling. Now we're seeing the staff are actually presenting more of a problem than the students are at Cornell. So again, we're looking at the things we can do to cut back on those problems that we're having. And so to be continued, we're almost redesigning the whole thing based on what last semester brought and what we're finding, are the new challenges.
Okay, great. Mike Sigler?
Hi, Charlie. I'm just wondering, with the Senate now with a veto-proof majority, I'm just wondering how does that affect your approach to the Senate and the governor's office? Really, I mean, it would seem to me he doesn't have as much power now as he would.
Great question. Let me give you my answer, and it could be totally wrong. Okay, but this is just me, with all the experience I've had with the Cuomos and in Albany and the legislature. This governor is going to make sure he's relevant. He's not going to allow, how many overrides, there have been in Albany again, but think about it. There are so many opportunities theoretically for overrides. Every time a governor does something unpopular or overreach, and the Republicans in this case, but again, you had minorities that were ready to act. So you've had the ability to override every day of the week for 30 years that I've been around. When it happens, it's like an earthquake, because again, it's these governors, they have a lot of authority. They've got a lot of tools that we know of. They also, behind the scenes, they're working the phones. They're making sure that they're not irrelevant, because you get overridden in New York and it's news. And then of course, what's to stop them from doing that again? So I'll make the point. It was huge news. I think it was 1998 when Pataki decided to be a fiscal conservative one year. He vetoed, I think it was 413 line item ads. A lot of it affected us at Cornell. The legislature, Republican Senate, Democrats in the Assembly overrode every one of those vetoes. It was like July 4th and Christmas wrapped up in one. It was like an event that I'll never forget. It was like an outside the building festival. It's so unusual. Now, this governor is the craftiest of them all. He knows if he allows that to happen, he could be declared by somebody he wouldn't be irrelevant, but he could be seen as irrelevant or less relevant. Not going to happen. My opinion, not going to happen. So I think, this is what I think, what it means to us. Great question. So I've already told people, I think he takes not a hard left turn, but some subtle left turns. He's going to be, so what does it mean? He's going to spend more money. He's going to issue more debt. He has these tools, and I think, and again, what does he know? He knows he can be a tough guy, but if he doesn't get away with it, if in the end somehow they override him, then what's the use of that? Then it threatens everything else he wants to do. So make a long story short, I think this results in more state spending. Any way you cut it, fewer cuts. Again, what does that mean? I mean, they have a $10 or $12 billion deficit current year and next. So maybe he borrows more than he was going to borrow. Maybe he cuts less. The feds are going to be helpful to some extent, more than they would have been. Again, wait for the new Biden administration. He'll get some help there. They're very close, those two. They've worked together over the years a lot. Okay, the vice president, the former vice president, and the former HUD secretary. they really are, they're on the same page on a lot. So I think, but the dynamics in Albany, I think he makes sure to stay closer to the leaders in both houses. And the leaders, they know he's governor. He's got a lot of clout. And I think he figures out ways of never letting that happen or never even getting close. This is my opinion. I don't think that it's going to be hard for him to stay out of that sort of supermajority territory. That's my opinion. Also, think about it. These are human beings, and he's got relationships with some are very good relationships, some are not. But even these people in the majority, he has to keep an eye on the minorities too. They can come into play, but just the majorities, those numbers, there are people there he can rely on if he does things that they care about, not to allow that to happen. So that's my sort of long answer. I think it does change his behavior so that he becomes more of a progressive than we would have seen otherwise.
For example, I've already seen press that said he's talking about raising taxes on the wealthy.
Sure.
That was a non-starter before.
That's right.
So like
Legal
last month, what Deborah?
or legalizing recreational marijuana. That's a big one too. But
Yeah, like we said last month,
for that might be budget.
he'll figure out where the parade is going and jump in front of it. So, anything else, Mike?
Yeah, but it's a really inside baseball question, but you're kind of the guy to ask that of. So,
Go ahead.
I mean, Kamala Harris is obviously going to run in 2024. I think, I would assume she would. Andrew Cuomo is going to run in 2024. I'm just wondering how, while he may have a great relationship with Biden, I'm not sure how helpful the federal government's going to be. I don't know if he's counting on a big aid package from the feds, but I don't know. I don't know if that's going to play into it. Like I said, inside baseball.
I'll give you my answer on that. I mean, I don't think they think that far ahead like that. I mean, sure, you can think about it. So much can happen. I think he is counting on a federal aid package. I think it's, I just sort of can't imagine the K-12 schools getting cut within a year and you have a month left. I know they're withholding payments. They're saving money. That's saving them a lot of money. But I just have a hard time imagining, this is New York State, just if they have to borrow money, they will. And he can borrow a lot of money in the current year to get past this. And who in the legislature is going to stop him? Who in the industry is going to stop him? Even taxing a little bit more on the wealthiest, sure. There'll be the same, Manhattan Institute, maybe Citizens Budget Commission. You'll have the same voices. But again, going back to your comment on the legislature, we just had an election. The Dems won more seats, okay? Super majority. Again, don't even say the words. We're in this really weird, very unique time here. And the state's been through a lot. I was talking to somebody the other day just about the 70s and 80s, New York City, and how the government led the way, and then the private sector came in, and it was in a taxi cab several years ago, and the cab driver was complaining that he couldn't live in Manhattan because the rents were so high. And I said to him, "Hey, buddy," and he blamed Mike Bloomberg. And I said, "Hey, buddy, I used to live down here. You couldn't walk here. You could live here, but you wouldn't survive living here. It was so unsafe and so dirty and so horrible." So, but New York City in the 70s, the federal government, in that case famously said, drop dead. Remember that whole thing? But the state came in and saved them, and you have this economic boom. I think the MTA, the schools, infrastructure, I think, hopefully will benefit upstate as well. And I think they just don't have a choice but to let's invest in this state and the city. We live here, and we're going to get past this. I think that'll be the theme, with some federal help this time, more than before.
All right. Thanks, Charlie.
Deborah, then Anna, then Mike Lane.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Charlie. I want to go back to Mike's first question and think about what this supermajority in the Assembly and the Senate might be able to do with respect to the existing budget process, which gives the governor a really outsized amount of power over what gets spent. Is there any chance that that process would be changed legislatively?
Always a chance. I think you'd have to have some people work on that. It's a very, let's say, sort of inside baseball, unattractive topic to really work on. There was work done on this in the late 80s, very intensively. And it was around changing the state fiscal year. We're the only state. Again, there are reasons why the fiscal year doesn't work. The tax revenues are coming in April, and your fiscal year starts. You've got to figure out how much you have to spend for the coming year in late March. It's like the timing it's the shortest amount of time between executive budget presentation and enactment of any state. So it's sort of like there was a lot of work done on that. But again, it's like you're devoting a lot of resources to a process that I think, frankly, a lot of people feel like, wait a minute, we've got budget issues. Again, right now we have a pandemic. It's a lot of convenient, good reasons for not changing the balance of power. Now, the courts gave the governor more of that power, over the last 20 years. I'll stop there. I can't predict anything, but again, supermajority, I don't think that would come into it. The governor is going to make sure he's part of that. There may be things that he decides, balance of power, hey, magnanimously giving some of that power away to them, possible. I don't think that they use the supermajority on the budget. I just don't see that really happening. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Anna.
Hey, Charlie. How are you?
Great.
I just wanted to add actually to Mike's answer. I'm going to give an update later. I've been drinking a bit from a fire hose, as Charlie knows. Charlie has been a tremendous help for me. Thank you. But the things that are also really important to remember, the governor has the number of every single legislator, and particularly the leaders. And I don't mean the physical number. I mean, he knows, he's got contacts in their staff. He knows them. He knows their closet. He knows what's in their closet. Everything that. But also, he appoints a lot of the members of a lot of the committees. We saw that with the CLCPA, CAC. A majority of the members he appointed. The entire education system, he really oversees that and dictates a lot of things. Another really big piece is the Empire State Development. The legislature has very little control over allocations and distribution of funds through the Empire State Development. So, a lot of those things keep him in very central, predominant power, besides the fact that the legislation that I signed on to support in the summer, that would have created a referendum in 2021, which would have changed the budget process and would have allowed legislatures to add or remove components of this state budget, but also most importantly would have prevented the governor from slipping things into the budget that are non-budgetary related. For example, in this last budget, he slipped in the 5-year forgiveness for any hospitals with any deaths related to COVID or really anything. Nothing to do with budget, but he can slip non-budgetary things in. And if you don't like them, you have to vote against the entire budget. And that the conference, the Assembly and Senate conferences refused to come back to session to vote on that. And so the earliest that can come through now, it has to be voted on by 2 consecutive legislatures. Since it was not passed this year, the earliest it can be voted on again is 2022 and then 2023, so that it is 2 consecutive legislatures. So just to add some depth to what Charlie's saying as far as the governor's power will continue to be. And just lastly, I'll say, I really agree with what Charlie's saying. It will not look good for an override of any veto. So he'll be careful. I think he'll be more cautious about what he vetoes, and he'll put more emphasis on manipulating what it is that is going through the legislature on the front end, so that he doesn't feel he needs to veto it, and then he'll take credit for it. So that, I think we can expect to see more of that action. So I just wanted to add that. Charlie, does that seem all about accurate?
Yes, I can add a little bit even to that, that commentary, where I'll just add a little bit more to it. Again, sort of just how complicated it is when things go to the courts. You throw yourself, like you said, the state constitution, if you're going to change that, just like Anna said, there's a process, takes a while. I think it's very inside baseball if you go down that route. And I just coincidentally was a minor player in one of these in 1990. Again, I was on the Ways and Means staff, and we were just changing state law a million times in the annual budget, which we should not have been doing. But we were doing it, and it got so out of hand, and it happened to be something that I put in the banking budget, that the bankers took to the Court of Appeals. And that was the sort of infamous case, which became the bankers case, which gave the governor a lot more authority in the budget, because
it's your fault, Charlie.
Yeah, it's just like total coincidence. But, again, we were just, things over time, people get more comfortable, and nobody says, hey, don't get close to the line, because you know what the Constitution or the law says. And so we weren't even, we weren't even thinking about that. But that became, but then my point is this: you make any kind of you test it. Somebody takes you to court, and it was the guy named Bob Schultz, in the 80s, and the bankers and all these people. There's always somebody who has some axe to grind, or some who unfair or don't like it. You go to court, very unpredictable. And that court at that time gave the governor a lot more clout over the legislature. But again, you can't predict what the courts will do. At least I can't. And that was a shocker. So again, you make any change or you test it, you end up with these judges who are looking at the Constitution, the laws, they have a discovery phase. And again, that was done Court of Appeals. There's nobody after the Court of Appeals. You're done. And then that is your new rubric, which changed a lot. Again, what Anna's describing, this governor is very, very good at using the laws, the Constitution. He's a lawyer himself, but he has some really good people around him, smart, who know what he can get away with. But then again, then somebody comes up and tests it, and then you're in uncharted territory. So I guess I'll make a prediction that he avoids going down that road of testing it, of pushing the limits. He's got all the power that he needs. I'll add one area of the budget where he, in addition to ones Anna mentioned, the big ones, but also the NYSERDA money, that the PSC decides how that money's going to go out. NYSERDA does the contracts, totally off budget. A couple of times the legislature has seriously attempted to put that on budget. But again, it's, 3 people in a room. The governor didn't go along with that, negotiated that away. So the budget is, I will say, is the one time in the year when the legislative leaders have him, I would say pretty much over a barrel, particularly when they team up. Forget the supermajority. They sit there and say, sorry, buddy, you know what, we're going to make this thing late. And of course, if it's late, the governor does have some tools, but they don't want late, they want it on time, and they want it their way. And that's when a lot of the haggling gets done. So no, I won't make a prediction on big changes, but I don't think this governor at least will try to get too close to making any big changes.
Mike Lane?
A couple of comments on the serious questions. Charlie, thanks for being here. One comment is that a lot of what the discussion has just been around would have been addressed had we had the Constitutional Convention, which unfortunately the legislature, no legislator that I know of was in favor of it, and the unions were against it. But that would have given us an opportunity to address the kind of issues we've just been talking about. The other comment I wanted to make to Mike Sigler is don't count Joe Biden out for a second term. No president since Theodore Roosevelt has lame ducked himself. And I don't think this is going to happen. That may be wishful thinking on the Republican part, but I expect he'll run for a second term. And all we got to do is think back about Ronald Reagan when he was the oldest president ever elected. He ran 2 terms, didn't he? So we'll just watch that. Now, here's my serious question. Charlie, what are you hearing about community colleges? This announcement by the governor about wanting this program, and I'm trying to think of the name of the program, where you take courses online. There's counting 20,000 courses, and you can get a degree on that. And I think they're starting to talk about that in lieu of community colleges. And it would be a terrible thing for all the people that need community colleges. They need the personal in-person help to get through that. So I wondered if you'd been hearing anything about that.
I'll try to keep my answer short because I got a lot to say about
Shorter
this.
than my question, I apologize.
Yeah, no, I love the question. So right up my alley, so it's called Open SUNY. They might have renamed it, but the former chancellor, Nancy Zimfer, 2 chancellors ago, said, let's do online, and they called it Open SUNY. Not really as successful as they wanted, but again, we're in this new world of the pandemic. So you have all these students going to these SUNY schools, and look at Cornell, who are now these professors who never had anything online. Okay, so having said that, I'm hearing really weird things. Well, I'm sort of hearing not anything clear, but some disconcerting things that I'm seeing or hearing or feeling in Albany about community colleges. Not new though. Let me tell you where I'm coming from. I did go to a community college, wasn't that familiar with them. Of course, I'm a Cornell guy, but I concluded about, I would say 15 years ago, and I said this to this governor's higher ed staff and others, that dollar for dollar, the best investment that New York State can make in higher ed is community colleges. Best investment, particularly when the economy is in trouble for many reasons. Again, I'm not going to, give you my thoughts on this, except to say, I've said this as a Cornell person, the community colleges in the state deserve the first dollar in higher ed. They're that super critical to New York State and New York State's the current and the future. And part of the reason why I say that is because they don't get that treatment. They come last every year.
Right.
As long as I've been around, they've come last. The legislature has had to sort of, come in with money as an ad in the budget last minute, year to year, to pay for adjuncts and to give them capital money. And even within SUNY, they come last. It's not right. It's a flaw in the way that SUNY is set up. The governance of SUNY having one central board for 64 campuses. I won't bore you with that, but it is a real sort of a flaw in how New York State's organized in higher ed, and a flaw in, I think, how people treat community colleges. And year after year, one administration to the next, They always are last. And again, I have to say, and within SUNY, I see that as well. We're in a pandemic, big budget cuts. SUNY is a state agency. Let's not forget that. That's not a good thing when you're in a real sort of a resource-starved environment, because executives tend to say, "Oh, my state agencies, yeah, look, they're doing more with less." And SUNY is an agency, so I'm worried about the community colleges. I don't know anything more than that, but I know that they don't do well. They never do well, and when things are bad, they usually do poorly. And we have a new chancellor. I don't know how that's going to play in this. I don't, so I don't know any more than I'm telling you, but I'm worried about them long term, and then of course in the short term.
Thanks for your comments.
Yeah, that's disturbing, but I can't argue with you, the way it sounds. Thanks very much, Charlie. One of the things that's interesting, we're going to talk, if we have time today, we're going to talk a little bit about the NISAC package recommendations, which I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. I guess for the first time, we heard at our last meeting, for the first time, NISAC actually had a chance to meet with Rob Mujica, earlier in November, and really sit down and talk things through before the budget is done. One of the interesting things that they suggest is there are a lot of things in this package that are really in the weeds, kind of policy geeky changes that could make a difference to counties. One of the things is about the Fashion Institute of Technology, and we talked about this a bit last month, with Ryan Gregoire from NISAC, and that the NISAC's proposing that they just make it a regular SUNY university, and that would help counties with chargebacks, but tremendously with chargebacks, and is more, just more real world based, that it's not a community college, it's really a four-year college. So that's sort of a geeky one. Maybe Jim Malatras would like the idea of expanding his empire. I didn't say that in public, but
Yeah, I just, my only comment on that is, Carl McCall's wife is the president there. She's been there for many, many years.
Okay.
So they are always treated very specially. And, in the end, things, again, but the budgets are, budgets go up and down. They always do okay. And I think that, so again, they are treated differently, a little bit special. And I think there are reasons for that. There are legitimate reasons for that, but it's also, she's been there, Joyce Brown, for many, many years. And, it's different, specialized. I mean, you can make those arguments, but I guess I focus on the others, you know what I mean? I focus on the rest of I focus on the community colleges, you know what I mean? To your point. So, and it's tough. It's, in my opinion, it's not that much money. And yet they always, starve them.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to try to have an influence on that. We'd love to have your thoughts on the NISAC package at some point, if you have a chance to look at it. So just one last question. It might be a short question, long answer. As we get ready to, however lobbying works out in January or February, as we get ready to do it, what would be your advice? What should we focus on?
Woo, good question. I think it's virtual. I think that everything's going to be virtual, continue to be virtual, which makes it frankly a lot easier. Like our students at Cornell, we usually have them come to Albany for a day in December for student aid kinds of things. We meet with us, and so much easier in a way, because you don't have to do it in one day, and it would, you don't care about the snow and all those things. And so scheduling things is a lot easier with most people. And then I think it also, I found we have to give more thought to exactly the points, because you don't have the sort of the interpersonal and the little chit chat. It's all just business. And so, a half hour or an hour, you're just talking business. And so the meetings can be shorter, but you just can't have as many people in them, or it doesn't work as well, in my opinion. So our students, again, we've had scheduled meetings with them. It's also so easy now to Zoom into hearings, so that you can have a hearing on something and you can be at a hearing and even, speak at a hearing. That works out. Or have elected officials even join one of your meetings. Like on campus, we've had meetings we would never invite people to because, hey, who's going to come to Ithaca in the middle of November for that meeting? And we've invited, senators and assembly members, actually in this case, senators, to come and be part of a meeting for 10 minutes. And it was great, so, or staff people. So it's changed, Martha, a lot has changed. It's really interesting, but it's forced changes. Some of it I don't like, but some of it's more efficient, easier in a way. And it just, I'll stop there. But I think that, that a lot of offices, they're expecting, yes, set up a call, either a lot of phone calls or Zooms, and you can, get your points across that way. The dynamic within the legislature, I can't predict how that's going to go. It's very different from how it used to be. But in a way, it's easier to connect with individual people.
Okay, well, we will look forward to whatever that strategy looks like. And at least you won't have to give us a parking space in the Cornell lot.
There you go. Exactly right.
Thank you so much, both
You
of you,
betcha.
for coming. We always really, really appreciate your time. And
Great talking to everybody.
yeah,
Good luck with everything.
yeah.
Great.
Thanks a ton. Appreciate
Talk
it.
soon, Charlie.
You bet.
All right, so
And if you want to stay, I'll be talking next. You can always
You got
correct me if I say anything wrong.
speaking of the legislature, this is a connection. This is going to be a goldmine connection, Anna.
Yep.
Oh, no,
Yeah, well, I have to say, I think I am the only incoming legislator that has county government experience coming into this new group. So it should be
I
interesting.
don't know. NISAC had an update. I think there are 3 or 4.
There are, okay, good. I haven't
Yeah.
seen the whole list. That's on my list of homework. Not many, but that is good to hear that I'm not the only one. So I'm going to have to go to NISAC and get that list.
I can find that for you.
Yeah, that would be great. It's been, I can tell y'all, it's been a very surreal experience. Not elected yet, but it has been a fast and furious. Meetings have already started. 4 or 5 meetings a day. A lot of meetings with advocacy groups, constituents, local issues. So the list of priorities is wide and vast. But I can hit a few highlights of some of the things that I've been going through, and all of them very much related to economic recovery. And I did want to give one update with respect to the resolution that we put forward through this committee on tax the rich and the resolutions at the state level for tax the rich. I was in a revenue meeting recently with just a few mentors to understand the system. And essentially the revenue bills that we have supported, they need to pass this year, or they will end up waiting an entire year. Many of them, those related particularly to income.
What you mean, 2020 or 2021?
2020, right? So they'd have to be in place by January because they're related to income tax. So if they do not go through in this legislative year, then they will be, evaluated sometime next year, but would not go into effect until 2022 because they're related to income tax. So that was a new piece of information. And there's, I'm obviously really interested in that happening before I am I take my oath and am seated. There's one other thing that that I have thrown my name into that I'm hoping will happen before I'm seated, and that is a moratorium on evictions. That is a bill from Karina Reyes. And that I can get you the full name of that, a number of that bill. The reason why that one obviously is really important right now is because, of course, we're seeing a spike in homelessness. We're seeing a spike in job loss, and we're seeing a spike in COVID cases. So that's the Reyes-Myrie bill. The Assembly bill number is 10827, and that's the Emergency Housing Stability and Displacement Prevention Act. The reason that I'm particularly in support of this one, obviously, is because we're seeing such huge COVID spikes. And we know this from public health, one of the greatest risk factors is, not being able to stay at home, right? That's the message that we're telling everybody, stay at home. A significant number of people are losing their homes. There's some misunderstanding of the current, what is being called a moratorium on evictions. It is not a true moratorium on evictions. It is, it's the Safe Harbor Act, but there are tremendous restrictions on the Safe Harbor Act. And in fact, there are many cases, some key cases in Rochester, where tenants tried to use that, the Safe Harbor Act, and were not considered eligible. So
does any of these have any rental assistance, actually payments that?
So that was another thing. You know how here we had the rental assistance where we had the fund, and because of the restrictions on that funding pot, there were a lot of restrictions on who could use it, and ultimately it did not end up getting used to the extent we would have liked. And what we found was about 50% of the people who even applied, which was a significantly lower number than we expected, actually successfully qualified. So earlier this year, there was a bill that went through that we supported in the county legislature. That was the voucher program. And it was $100 million, and a small portion of that was even allocated. So significantly fewer number of people applied for it. And again, like we experienced here, only half the number of people who applied for it actually qualified. Either it needs to be streamlined, the qualifications for that pot of funding need to be streamlined, not either, that would need to happen, and there are other things that need to happen. The other piece of legislation that
but I meant the Karina Reyes bill, does that have funding?
That is not a voucher program. That is specifically a moratorium on evictions that would extend through the pandemic and extend a year beyond what is officially considered the end of the pandemic. And that is an eviction on moratoriums and foreclosures on mortgages. So, it's important to note that it's both. Basically putting the onus on the banks rather than the renters or the small landlords.
So that does protect the small landlords and some
landlords, correct.
and that's through the moratorium on foreclosure.
That is the moratorium. So the title of it, and that I just read, and I will pull it back up. The full title of this 10827 is the Emergency Housing Stability and Displacement Prevention Act. So you can read the details of that one. That's one of two bills that I think is really important. The other bill is from Yuleen New, and that bill is 10806. And that is to suspend rent and mortgage payments. Again, putting the pressure on banks rather than the pressure on those who can least afford it, which are the small landlords and the renters. This bill is often called the rent forgiveness. But the thing that people don't, and I've made this clear to my colleagues, future colleagues, the messaging really needs to change. Because I don't think that's really, that really grasps the nature of this bill. So what we have right now is the voucher system, which puts the onus on renters to seek financial support they have to both prove that they have been negatively impacted financially and then seek funding for relief. What this bill that is called the rent forgiveness bill, that is Yulee News bill, that switches the equation so that renters don't have the onus put on them. It's the landlords that, if they have experienced financial hardship because of COVID, they can seek relief. So it's really just a flip of who then has to seek the aid. And if you think about it, it's actually better for both landlords and renters, because renters who are hand-to-mouth, like barely able to pay rent, and they have to decide between rent or gas in their car and food, are less likely to go through the process, able to go through the process of pulling all their paperwork together, applying, contacting state offices. If you've got a small landlord who's got a couple, rental places, that's he or she, that's a part of their job, or that's a part of their job. They're more likely to be able to successfully go through the program of seeking funding. And then ultimately you will end up with people being able to stay in their homes, protecting from the continued spread of COVID, and you'll have rent relief for the small landlords. Note that it's specifically focused on small landlords.
Anna, I'm going to take Mike Lane's question, but I want to wrap up this part of the meeting in 5 minutes, five minutes total. So if there's anything else.
So we had 10 minutes on here. I will talk about whatever you wanted. We've gone for about 5. So I'm happy to give you a few more minutes.
Okay, let's just say I was watching the clock when you started. I really do want to look.
It doesn't matter. I'm happy to take Mike's question.
I want to look briefly at the NISAC recommendations, et cetera. So Mike Lane, go ahead.
Just first, let me say very quickly that I think this bill you're supporting here, which is the landlord, anti-landlord, I think is not going to work. If you're not getting people applying, why aren't they going to social services? I'm sure there are a lot of social services people out there that are being paid, having their rent paid for them and helped. If they've got really a problem with COVID, they need to come forward and apply for the program that's out there. There are a lot of landlords that don't have mortgages. They have taxes to pay. They have utilities to pay. They have also the maintenance to pay on properties. That just doesn't account for any of that. I'll just leave it at that. But the other thing is, I wondered, Anna, do you know yet, compared to Barbara Lifton's staff, how many staff people you will have?
Yeah, so Barbara Lifton had a budget of about 240. I will have a starting budget of 175. So I will have 3.25 people to start, 3.25 people to start, which is less than the 5 that she had, 4.5, 5.
That's what I thought would probably happen. Okay, yep. Thank you.
You're welcome. And, I just want to correct one thing. I do not consider it an anti-landlord bill. So, we'll just.
I'm glad you don't.
That. But, we could talk about that offline. I can hit a few other things. There is certainly discussion.
And I just want to say, I think the point is that landlords use rent not just to pay mortgages.
I'm aware. Yeah. I'm aware. I just don't think that the labeling of it as an anti-landlord bill is accurate. Because, you look at any bill, there are current ones, there are tenants who do not benefit or can qualify, and it's not going to hit everyone. It's just, where you put the emphasis. So, those are housing related. The New York Health Act, there is renewed discussion on it as a part of an economic recovery package. It is recognized that the largest chunk of the federal funding that we get in the state goes into our Medicaid program, 148.1 billion. The New York State receives, and a significant portion of that goes into Medicaid. So, and only 1/3 of New York State residents actually receive Medicaid. So it's not very efficient. And it has been noted that it could be a revenue saver. So there's been discussion about that. Those are some of the things. There's also criminal justice reforms that I have been looking into, particularly prioritizing The HALT Solitary Confinement Act, there's renewed discussion on that. And I have been working with some of my colleagues on re-emphasizing reentry programs. So that is another component of work that I've been doing. As far as the environment, last thing I'll touch on, I have been prioritizing, work on PFOAs and PFAS chemicals, banning those, and a focus I have been working briefly, and Martha has as well. There is an initiative called the Transportation and Climate Initiative. It would be similar to the RGGI system that we have. I am researching it now. The thing that's the most important is that the fee on producers not be passed off at the pump, which would most affect low-income people. So that's what I'm looking into right now, and that would be really important for me in order to support it moving forward, but it's very promising. And the last one in the environmental category is the Fossil Fuel Divestment Act. And there is a lot of work on that at the state level, and I'm exploring. So those are some of the main categories that we all talked about, or you heard me talk about during my campaign, and that I've been emphasizing. In the interest of time, obviously there's many other small things. Education is obviously also a really big thing. We have 4 higher ed education institutions in this district. So that will inevitably be a core part of what I will focus on.
All right, and not, is that all? No. What about committees? You and I talked a little while ago, and do you have any more information on what committees you might get?
They have not given us a list of committees. I put the health committee as my #1 priority. I put it as my #1 priority because the likelihood of me getting it is very, very small. It is one of the most competitive committees to get on. Given my background and the ranking, I hopefully have a chance. I also put housing and corrections as the other ones in my top 3. 4 was family and children, and 5 was the ENCON, environmental conservation. And then it goes down to number 10 was agriculture. I'm most likely to get that. So it was ranked lower on my priority list, given the likelihood of getting it. Higher ed was also on there. So we'll see. I haven't heard anything yet. I have a call in with Carl soon. I was just told that I may be able to get a district office in Cortland. That was a call from Carl. So that is something I want to do because I feel that Cortland hasn't necessarily gotten as much attention as it could use. And Carl agreed with me on that, which I'm excited about. So we'll see. But that's one of my issues that I'm working on right now.
Would that have to be out of the same budget, or would you get more of a budget if you had that?
That's independent, so that's not in my my current, so certainly not in my staffing budget. That was something that the speaker reached out and said, we'd like to, help with that. Please do some research. So.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Well, Madam Assemblywoman, you know where we live. We will be in touch. So
there's a lot. So
I guess, we usually have our committees bleed into the next year, into January, sometimes February, but you'll be on the other side.
Yeah, and I am happy to, if I can, I'm certainly happy to have, as you have with other representatives, have a staff person come and give you updates in this committee. I've already made clear to them that I hope this committee continues. I think it's a brilliant committee. I think it's really helpful, and it's also it will be helpful for me. So absolutely.
Terrific. Absolutely. Door is always open for you or staff or anybody. So
wonderful.
Okay. And next time, I hope we can give you some more time than this. So, and yeah, as usual, we get jammed at the end here. So, so I did want to get at least briefly to the NISAC document. Did folks have a chance to look at that? There's a lot of good stuff in there. There's a lot of stuff that I don't understand,
Medicaid stuff is pretty technical.
Oh, I know. The social service, but it seems like a great, if they would actually be willing to dig in and work on some of the stuff, it seems like some real opportunities here, if only to make things easier to do, if not move any dollars differently. I really like the, all right, any other comments or reactions from folks on this list? What do you like? What do you hate? Deborah.
The one thing that concerned me, well, I mean, there's a lot, and there are a lot of things that we're already doing in various ways here in Tompkins County. But they talk about creating a blue ribbon commission to redesign state and local service delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my concern about these commissions and committees, as we saw under the CLCPA, is that they're always very heavy on appointments from the state executive that Cuomo controls. So my concern would simply be that this would be another process that he would have disproportionate control over.
Yeah, I was on a couple of groups that were dealing with Medicaid 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And yeah, it obviously depends how it's set up. And this one specifically says, you know, with division of budget people, legislators, other agency officials, school district officials, and reps from state and local governments, as well as advocates. So I assume they would be getting into, the idea would be to get into levels of detail like the stuff that we just said we don't understand. So there may be if something like this gets set up, I can imagine that the top level would be sort of pretty political, but they might end up sort of having subcommittees that really, okay, what do we really do about social services? What do we really do about youth services, et cetera? So I think tossing this out there as a beginning of a platform has a lot of potential. And because especially I like the way it's called state and local service delivery, because that identifies, sort of puts it clearly, it's a joint determination of how the services get rolled out. Mike Lane? You're on mute, Mike.
Sorry. You asked on the list about what we like and what we don't like.
Yeah.
I really like the NICEC program on the sales tax recommendation. And I think we really ought to continue to press on that. I'm really questioning about their program to loosen the investment opportunities for counties. I think there's a real chance that counties can get into trouble. Probably not ours, because not likely we'd use any of them. But you know, my mind goes back to Orange County, California, when it went bankrupt because it was investing in repurchase agreements back then. These things are, you know, purport to be safer, but I question it.
Deborah, you want to comment on that?
Well, yeah, that was another one of my concerns, Mike, and I'm glad that you brought it up because I was part of the bailout of the S&Ls that started in very late 80s. And, you know, one of the things that led to their downfall is that they were allowed to use their money for a lot of really sketchy investments, and they did not have the financial expertise, even as, you know, S&L administrators, to understand the dangers of what they were investing in. There were some other things in here. I had a question about their county revenue options.
Before we leave the investment question, that's why I tossed it over to Rick Snyder and said, what do you think about this? Would this help us? And he said, meh, you know, maybe one of these instruments might help us, but he didn't see it as a big deal. But anyway, so.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, not every county is in our position, and desperation sometimes leads to poor investment decisions.
Mhm.
But the sales tax stuff, I wasn't clear. Are they saying they want to collect sales tax on VRBO, Airbnb on top of occupancy taxes?
Yeah. Hotels do pay that.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Short-term rentals don't. I like that one a lot.
Okay,
I did not allow for a temporary sales tax increase. I think we said that to Ryan last month.
it's regressive.
Sure, yeah. And I don't like the one about the state to provide the counties the option to pay AIM-related payments if the county chooses to do so. I can see that. That just puts us in the vice. Like, how do we say no to that?
Yep.
They should pay their own bills.
Well, it also puts us against municipalities.
Yeah, yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Also, does anybody understand the implications of excluding pilot agreements from the tax cap formula? Because that lost me entirely. Or is that one blue ribbon commitment? Or
No, I don't think this has been since the tax cap has been in place. And I don't exactly understand it either, but I'm pretty sure that Jason does. So
let's ask him.
yeah.
Well,
Maybe-
I can imagine if the schedule of tax increases goes up, and actually the tax that's paid goes down, then that's going to affect how much your revenue is in the calculation for the tax cap. And so if you don't have pilots as a part of that, they ought to be, I think they're asking for it to be carved out, the way I see it.
Yeah, I think what that means is if, Hotel Ithaca starts over that 10-year period of a pilot is paying more into their tax,
Right.
more tax bill, then this proposal says, take that revenue, that local revenue out of the calculation so that it doesn't displace property taxes we can raise other way, and through the general tax, I think.
Martha,
It's clear as mud.
Yeah.
I just suggest that perhaps the other committees on the legislature that deal with these particular issues, like public safety and HHS, we might ask them and the departments that they oversee to give their thoughts on these.
That's a good idea. I was actually going to, in the last minute, we got I was going to kind of try to say, where do we go from here? It's already December. If we want to plan any kind of effort for January or February, we don't have much time. Do we want to do a special meeting so that we can really map out a strategy before January? Or I will send this NISAC thing to committee chairs and department heads and see, and do what you're suggesting, asking for input. That's a really good idea.
So are you saying specifically focused on this list from NISAC, what we support, what we don't support, and what we want to have collectively together going into the next NISAC meeting? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, right, kind of getting ready.
Sounds great.
What's on our list for advocacy?
Well, and honestly, I think that would be really helpful for me going to the state if you all did that.
Okay.
Which, of course, I would be a part of it.
And the idea being, this is just a starting point. Department heads especially may have completely other issues that they'd want us to lobby about.
Well, and Martha, if you send me the list of the others that have county experience, the reason I brought it up, of course, is having the county perspective. I can tell you already in several meetings, I've been the only one who has brought up unfunded mandates of specific things like, for example, legalizing marijuana, as long as it doesn't X, Y, and Z. It would be good to talk to the others. I'm sure I can get the list as well, but if you have it shorthand, that would be great.
Was it a NISAC election update? I'll find the link and I'll send it to everybody.
Now I'm looking at 14,000 emails I haven't read yet.
I understand. I do. You're doing both jobs now at once. At least after January, you won't have to do this job. When do you get sworn in?
January 6th. And, both jobs are really important to me. So as 3 weeks more, I won't be sleeping very much, but that's fine. I want to make sure they're both strong. But yeah, January 6th, I will be, I will kill off my clone and just stick with one full brain and one body.
Okay. All right.
Martha,
That would be great. Yes, Kathy.
real quick, that this morning, Jason actually brought this document to the department heads, and he was going to be reaching out to some. So I don't know if you wanted to talk to him first.
Okay, that's excellent. Is that the November 20th version? Because I sent out an early one. Yeah, November 2020.
I believe so.
Look at the cover of it. It would say updated. November.
Well, no, this is the one from your agenda packet, but I'm just saying that he raised this morning with department heads and deputies, and is going to be following up with department heads. So
Excellent. That's good to know. I will check with him then. Thanks, Kathy. Appreciate that. All right, really fast. Can we get a motion on the minutes from November 4th?
Oh, can I have a minute?
Huh?
Can I have a minute? I had my hand up.
Yeah. Okay, Mike, let's just do the minutes.
Okay.
Deb moves, Anna seconds. And just again, kudos to Katrina for like a book here of really important information. Thank you, Katrina. Any comments on the minutes? All right, Deborah,
Yes.
Anna,
Yes.
Mike Lane,
Yes,
Mike Sigler,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, so that's unanimous. Go ahead. I didn't see your hand.
Play us off, Mike.
No, I was just going to say, so I've read through the NISAC thing, and to me, I don't think that it recognizes kind of the change that's happened in this last election.
Mike, you're breaking up.
That's probably to be expected. I mean, this is it's an older document now. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you said
Kind of
that-
fade in and out.
you said this document doesn't recognize the change that happened in the election.
I think NISAC, I mean, if
Mike, cut your video.
committee,
You're
for
breaking up.
example,
You cut your
all
set.
right.
Okay, go ahead.
If I was on NISAC, or if listen, so I'm a Republican, you guys are Democrats. You control both houses by a lot. If you can't get cannabis, for example, legalized in the next year, I would consider that a fail, because you've even got Republicans on board to legalize that. So, like, to me, that's like a no-brainer. Like, I don't even know how that doesn't pass, kind of idea. You know what I mean? And listen, I'm not a big fan of Medicaid for all. I think it's a bad system, but you guys like it. So again, I think you have the support. I mean, there's like 3 pages here on Medicaid and public health. All of that goes away basically if you pass, Medicaid for all. So I don't know. To me, that you're at a flex point, I guess you'd call it, or a decision point. Whereas there's an awful lot of pages here of stuff like, I don't know, they're talking about tolls and we're going to collect a little bit more tolls. You could probably put a 1-cent gas tax on and get more money doing that than you're going to get off of the tolls. I guess it just, I don't know. If it was me, I would go bolder. That's just me though. And I don't mean to give you any advice on this stuff, but it seems like you've got a lot of space here to make a bigger vision than kind of.
Can I just say that New York Health
let
isn't
me
Medicaid for all?
What'd you say, Deborah?
I said, my understanding of New York Health is not that it's Medicaid for all, but that's beside the point, I guess.
Okay, we could probably use a half hour on that alone, but Mike, I hear what you're saying. However, just like in the U.S. Congress and Senate, there are nuances to being a Democrat or a Republican. I was on a Eleanor's Legacy call yesterday with Andrea Stewart Cousins. And after the presentation, I got to, got to ask questions. The first 3 questions were basically, so are you supporting taxing the wealthy? She waffled, I gotta say. She didn't like go full-threaded, absolutely. In fact, the article I saw her quoted back in June or July was much more, seemed to me more positive, like, yes, we need to do this. So now she was much more, I would have to say, equivocal about it. And I think she wants to pay attention to the folks who didn't win by a lot, the folks that are still swing seats. So I hear what you're saying. And my hope in looking at these many pages of stuff is to pick out the things that are, to really pick out a few priorities. Since we only have a certain amount of attention and our legislators only have a certain amount of attention, pick out the things that are really going to make the biggest difference, and get done. I think you're right about marijuana. It should really get done. But it's also not going to make a difference in our budget for at least another year if we're lucky. So it's a multi-layered matrix of how you decide what to prioritize. But I like your encouragement to be as progressive as we can. So well,
listen, you guys won. I don't know what to tell you. Act like a winner then, and do what you're going to do.
That's not the Democrats' way.
Well, then, I mean, listen, I think it's going to have incredibly negative impact, but so be it. It's kind of like when we deal with the deficit. Well, it's apparently nobody really cares about the deficit anymore. So,
especially not your party.
Right. So not especially, I would say equally. Nobody cares about it anymore.
You want us to do bold and crazy things and everybody will hate it because it'll fail and then you'll have a Republican.
That's right.
Well, then don't do it. I mean, but this is what you've said you want to do. This is what you got elected to do. So then do it already. And then we'll make the best of the hash that comes out, basically.
The hash.
Nice turn, Deborah. Nice turn.
The Republican Party didn't used to be a monolith, especially the Republicans in the Northeast. But believe it or not, there are people that have different opinions about things in each party.
Yeah. Listen, let me just ask, would you guys be willing, and we don't have Henry, now we don't have Anna here, Shauna, would you guys be willing to do another meeting to really try to be, plan some strategy around January? Do another meeting before Christmas?
I think we need to get feedback from the department heads. I mean, I don't know that it's necessary that we do it before the next Tiger meeting, because if we do it at the next Tiger meeting, we will have a resolution ready for the second January legislative meeting, will we not?
Let's see, the next Tiger meeting would be January 6th. That's probably right about when the governor would be releasing his budget.
Yeah, well, he's not going to listen to us.
Right.
And I mean, we're addressing this to the Assembly and the Senate, right?
We go and harangue the second floor too, right?
Yeah, but that's just the start of the budget process. I don't see that we need to get it in before the budget's released by the governor. And I'm sure his budget's going to be ready to go long before we get a resolution out.
Yeah, I think that's why NISAC went to Mujica in November, early November. All right, I'll connect Jason and see what's going on with department heads, and we'll kind of work something out. And if it seems like it'd be worth having a strategy session, I'll run it by you. I'll see if you're willing to show up.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that maybe we could devote a bigger chunk of that meeting to just hearing from staff about these proposals.
Yeah, that's kind of the way was thinking of it. So, okay. Thank you all very much. Anything else for the good of the order? All right. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Paul, good to see you.